Welcome to another edition of In Conversation, and today I'm in conversation with Terry Eckersley. Terry, welcome. That was a very, very royal nod that you gave me there.
Well, you know, it's good to be welcomed and it's great to be here, Doug.
Great. Lovely to have you with us. We've been chatting, I think that's what we call it. I mean, we've been killing ourselves laughing while we were waiting to get on with this programme. So I think there will be some laughter in it, but there's a number of serious things also that we want to look at with Terry. And let's begin at the beginning. You were born into a tough working class family, I think, in Manchester.
Yeah, in
Tell us a
Greater
little bit
Manchester.
about that.
Okay. I was the last of 5 children, and I was born and raised on a council estate in Greater Manchester. When I was born, my mum was 43 and my dad was 53, and I think all the other children have left home. So it was like being raised really by sort of grandparent type figures. I'll continue to elaborate on that if you like. My father was a miner, as most men were in our area around that time, and worked in the local mine. And my mother had worked in local mills, again, as most people did in that time, so mines and cotton mills. She was quite a character as well, and worked on a local market stall and worked on a bread van and stuff like that. So quite outgoing and a very strong character. My dad was sort of a quiet guy, you know, gentle guy, and very well liked and respected as they both were. That's the starter for 10.
Yeah. And I think as you went through your early life in this area, I mean, I think some abuse came in. Your father died quite suddenly, I think.
Yeah.
All these things had an effect on your life in one way or another, didn't they? And sort of took you on a downward spiral.
Yes, definitely. It all started really when my dad was that source of love and affection and affirmation in my life, but I only saw him on small occasions because he worked regular night shifts. So I saw him in the morning for breakfast before I went to school, and saw him on regular family holidays. So as well as being tough working class, we still had some good fun, you know, and we did have 2 holidays a year. And I just want to drop that in, you know, it wasn't all hardcore and abusive and stuff. It was a good upbringing, and they did the best that they had with what they'd got. And when I was 13, a pivotal age for most young people, I came home from school one day, and my dad had just retired. So I was looking forward to spending quality time with this source of love, affirmation, affection in my life. And I came home from school one day, and he'd suddenly dropped dead. And ironically, when he was doing the local priest's garden, he was a committed Catholic, so was my mum, so was I up until that stage. I'd been an altar boy. I'm sure you can believe that. And so when this blow sort of hits you, I mean, that was the start of it. I remember my mum greeting me at the door and hugging me for the very first time. I was a 13-year-old boy, and I felt the hug was more for her than for me. I remember going to and she told me my dad had died, and I went to my bedroom, and I remember slamming the door shut and thinking, if there's a God, who my dad's apparently serving, I mean, doing God's garden, if you like, the local vicar's garden. He did lots of other people's gardens. If this can happen, I don't want anything to know with God or anybody, and nobody's going to ever hurt me again like this. Mm-hmm. And I made an active decision and an act of my will. I knew when I closed that door, I was closing the door to my heart. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to hurt me again. And from that moment on, there was other kids at our school who were the parents were going through divorces. One parent was dying of cancer. One guy was a thalidomide child. And so we had this negative clique of angry young men. And those days at school, you didn't have counsellors or helping with kids on the verge of exclusion or being supportive. There just wasn't that going on. So we all did our own things. And that led to this start of a real sort of rapid downward spiral.
And that led to Borstal, prison, drugs. Tell us what you remember about that time and about why you got involved in those things and how.
Okay. The guys I was hanging around with, we were all 13. We were all angry, young, wasn't getting any love, affirmation and support in any context. So either at nobody from my Roman Catholic Church was actively supporting or helping me. My mum was obviously grieving and going through stuff, and she was taking solace with some other members of the family and drinking a bit more. So she then became an absent mother. So I was coming home from school, 13 years of age, and there used to be a note on the top of the mantelpiece, dinner in microwave for 3 minutes, love mum, you know. And then I was starting to look after myself and stuff. But when a kid, more importantly me, is left on their own devices, you'll find other avenues and vents to do stuff, you know. So we started not going to school, forging our own sickness notes from our mum. So we got away with that, really. We start shoplifting. My friend, who was a thalidomide child, it was that age group, you know. 1961 I was born, and therefore so was he. He had one arm, but I'll tell you what, he could drive better than anybody I knew. He could pull the girls better than anybody I knew, and he could fight better than anybody I knew, especially with the plastic arm. Roy, I'll give Roy a mention. He's no longer with us, sadly. But Roy used to take the suppressor caps off his mum's car. She couldn't start it, she'd get a taxi to work. And so we'd all jump in his mum's car with him driving at 13. I mean, can you believe it? And we'd go on trips out and we'd have, you know, shoplifting competitions, who could shoplift the most gear, and we'd sell this. And so, I mean, we got locked up so many times in that period that in the end, my mum just wouldn't have me home. She wouldn't have me bailed to home anymore, nor would Roy's parents. A few of the other guys got bail, but it was all petty crime, theft stuff, you know, and the car stuff, I suppose. And we all ended up getting put in the care of the local authority for 3 weeks, and then some got put in care, had care orders, and I got released home on probation for 2 years. So that's how it started. I'm going to hand back to you so I can get a bit of a breather now.
I thought you were going to talk for the rest of the time, actually.
Yeah.
It was going to get worse before it gets better. So tell us how that developed. But basically, here you are, hardened in heart, as you said, refuse out, protecting yourself, doing what you wanted to do. How is God ever going to break into such a life, Terry?
Yes, well, that's a really good question, isn't it? How does God break into such a life? Or more importantly, how did God break into my life? I got to being 13. I came on probation for 2 years. But then you go back to school and you're like a local hero. You're like a celebrity type figure, really, sadly. So you sort of keep playing on that, you know. And by going into an institution for a time, you start becoming more hardened. As I said, I slammed the door of my heart. And as you're going in places like this, you learn how to fend for yourself and defend yourself, etc. But I did stable out a little while till I was 16. I did get expelled from school for refusing the cane. I mean, that's another story. You speak about abuse. When I was getting in problems and troubles at school, we didn't have counselling or support or care. We got 6 of the best, you know, on our hands with the cane. And the teachers gave it you like they wanted to, you know, stuff like that. And I got in some trouble for going out of school at lunchtime to buy some lunch. And that was like the cardinal sin. I remember you was going to get 6 of the best. And by this time, I was so rebellious and so angry, I thought, I'm not having 6 of the best. And I got expelled from school. They'd call it excluded now. And this is very ironic because we get to the end of my story. But I got excluded from school, expelled. But I was at home for a while, and I was told, don't know if it was a blag, but I was told that no other school would have me. So after a few weeks with social services and my mum and going around other schools for interviews, I had to go back to that school and be welcomed by 6 of the best. But I then left school with no qualifications, and I did work for a short time as a window cleaner, a bit like Van Morrison, I'll say. Van Morrison did that as well, and he turned out all right. But then shortly after that, The punk scene came along, and I love music, and we can speak about that later, but I just got really into the punk scene, the music, the rebellion, the sex, the drugs, and the rock and roll. And so I started, smoking weed. They call it cannabis, Started taking amphetamines, and just really, really, beginning to get on that track of being completely way off the rails and wild,
But God broke in. How did he do it?
He did, okay. That was interesting because around that time I then got put in a detention centre for 3 months, the short shock again for petty crime and stuff. Came out of that a bit more hardened, a bit more worldly wise, and became sort of a bit of a gang leader on my estate, and we're dabbling in, more in drugs now and more in rebellion. It's getting deeper, And around this time, there was a guy on our estate who we used to call Stan, the preacher man. And he was a great guy and a character. And he'd come outside our area of shops. We were the local gang. You probably see a few of those now. And he'd start to share with us that, that God loved us, Jesus had died for us, and be very passionate about it. And invite us back to his home, a few of us. And nobody had really showed us that kindness on the estate. And I always had respect. I'd always kept a respect, strangely enough, for God and faith. And I respected this guy for his courage and his boldness in sharing the gospel with us. And one evening, after we'd been taking some drugs in a friend's house, all this crazy stuff started happening. Spiritual stuff of a dark nature, I'd say. And for the first time since I'd been 13, and I was now, I was about 20 or 21, around that age, I wasn't frightened of man, nor beast, nor anything, but I got very, very scared. And a friend of mine who was with me at that time, he came round to my house. He was very scared, knocking on my door. We were both really freaked out. And my mum said to me, God's warning you, And we went to see Stan, the preacher man, and we told him, and he said, guys, there's a God, yes, he loves you, he sent Jesus to die for you, but there's also a devil, and you've been playing around in his playground, and the way that you can get free from that is by giving your life to Christ. Would you like to do that? And when I share my testimony regularly, I say, if he would have said, Terry, you need to jump through 3 flaming hoops of fire,